happened today is that
So
when we
they should
finish,
always do that.
when we finish a planning board meeting, we don't get our minutes
Right.
finalized for 1 month.
What we can do, I mean, if there's a specific issue, you can make that be known at the planning board meeting. We could draft up a letter for you to sign,
That's
to
it.
send to the ARB and say, this is our issue, please address it.
So
and get
therefore, if
back
they're
to us.
meeting the next week, they have it.
Right.
Good,
Right.
good. I'm trying to cut it.
Okay. The, this issue is under 308,
Yes.
okay, 318C. This was not addressed by the ad hoc committee, but was brought up at one of our work sessions.
What page you on?
It's on page, bottom of page 3, top of page 4.
Go ahead.
This was right now, the ARB, no matter what, never has to make a decision, technically.
And they get paid for it?
Yeah, and the remedy for the applicant is to go to Supreme Court, file an Article 78 proceeding, and bring what's called a mandamus proceeding to require the ARB to make a decision. That costs thousands of dollars and time and effort for everybody. Your thought process was at these workshops was, well, when the application is complete, when there's no more revisions working back and forth between the applicant and the ARB should make a decision. And then there was discussion of how long should it take them to make a decision.
Should or must?
Must. They should, so you said, okay, they must make a decision. How long must it be then to give them time to analyze? We're talking about 45 days.
So basically, the applicant has the opportunity, and this happened to us recently with the country club, where they basically demanded a decision.
Right.
And I think that would answer the issue. Basically, if
And we can
if
say
the
that.
applicant feels that they're done, changing, proposing, adjusting, they want a decision at this point, they can draw the line and whatever, then the planning,
The
then the
amount of time.
attorney has one. You know, so
So
it's-
the ARB meets twice a month.
Right. So-
Sometimes people are away, sometimes there's not a
Yeah,
quorum.
45 days is a good number.
So do you make, I know there was some
No, but that's
public
the
issue
clock's
about
on
the
clock
climate.
starts.
So has anybody ever gone to the mandamus?
But the clock's
Not
got,
since this code, no.
there's history here, the clock is got to stop.
There is history. There is, under New York State law, for instance, the ZBA, they have a public hearing on something, let's say it's a zone change. They have 60 days under state law to make a decision.
And this
It's
law
not uncommon.
was in the prior zoning code. It was dropped and changed to mandamus in the most recent 3-year-old zone.
When you make it 60 days, you make it 90 days.
I guess the question which was raised in the conversation in the public is, what is the default outcome of the delay?
If they don't make a
The
decision.
so-called running out of the clock.
Right, when does it start? Maybe you can say when there's an affirmative
Well-
letter.
Well, no,
from-
I'm saying
from the applicant.
if.
He says, when does it end?
But,
No,
but,
we
no,
put
I'm
that in there.
saying, when time runs out, what happens is sort of the question, is the project approved, or is there some other,
Do you want to have
some
another?
other administrative thing that goes
You wanna have-
into
there must be
effect?
another
And I think,
meeting?
and I think, yeah, well, I think there was sort of feeling that the default should not be that the project is therefore approved.
I mean, you're saying
At
after
that
45
point, there
days.
has to be some other administrative remedy. I don't know. what-
After, I mean, I guess you have, what's the starting point, what's the ending point? The starting point is, I want a decision from you.
Good.
There should be something maybe in writing, made by the applicant to the ARB, requesting a decision in writing that we're not changing anything. That would be the starting point. Now, the ending point, no matter how many days you go, 45, 60, 90, whatever, 120, a year, whatever it is, what happens then? Now, maybe you say, okay, once that letter is written, 45 days pass. At the next meeting, the ARB must make a decision, or there's a.
Approve or deny.
Prove or deny, yeah. Or there's,
Or it goes to the.
Our history is that
Or do you-
nothing was done. It was
There's-
just silence.
the proposal was that there was an approval. They should make a decision.
The past law was if they didn't make that decision in 45 days, it was an automatic approval.
It's an automatic approval.
That's what it used to be. So Rob is bringing that into question. You could say, all right, if you don't make a decision within 45 days, it goes to another board. You could do that, say, it bumps up to the.
Or-
Zoning board?
Or the zoning.
Or there has to be an up or down.
Right.
One way or the other, there has to be.
Must be a vote.
Let's suppose
There has to be-
they
Well,
don't,
it doesn't have to be approved,
if they don't act,
but the
then
default,
if they don't act, obviously if they make a decision, the issue is solved. So they don't make a decision, they're not prepared for whatever reason. I mean, they
Give them one
won't
more
stay.
meeting?
No. This is exactly what happened in the past. Nothing ever happened.
But this is.
It's not fair to anybody.
Is this approved, then you can appeal to the zoning board?
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Go to the zoning board from there?
Well,
That's the
all
appeal
the
process.
administrative decisions of the
They're
ARB
just
go
trying
to
to get out of
the
limbo.
zoning board
They
on
get a
appeals.
decision, it's either no or yes.
Is that the way it works now with
Yeah.
other?
Is 45 the right number if it's not?
Well, if it's a disapproval,
It's automatically disapproved, and the applicant has the opportunity to begin the application cycle once over again back to the HRB, or go to the zoning board of
That's-
appeals.
Or it's
Sort of like that.
automatically sent to the zoning board.
So, we'll have to file an appeal.
He has to
That's
do
the
an
following
affirmative
appeal.
act to apply to the zoning board.
automatic
Whatever your
disapproval
process for getting applications in.
with an appeal
With appeal to the
to the
zoning.
zoning board, is the 45 days okay?
In this
Forty-
one,
45, it covers 2
45
meetings.
days just automatically.
Three,
sent
really.
to the
So
zoning
for
Oh, they
HRB,
meet more often, 3 meetings.
That sounds very long.
45 is plenty.
This was,
From the point that they request, the point that they request a decision, is it 3 more meetings before they can get a decision?
Yeah.
I don't know,
They
I,
have
also, can I suggest that we not, maybe we can't figure this exact administrative process out at this moment, but I'd be curious to know, what do our brother and sister towns,
we could provide some information.
what is Hastings and, like, what do they, because this is, huh?
They're no brother.
Whatever our folk, I mean, right, there's gotta be, we're not the first ones who are kind of wrestling with this idea of approvals going on too long. So it'd be interesting to know. I'd
But
just
we
like to
can
know
provide
some
some
information.
information.
What do the other towns do?
You think you know what everything is?
Yeah, I think everything goes to the zoning board, they get the denial and
They go to the zoning board.
I like
Let's
this
find out.
automatically denied, and they have recourse to the zoning board. That way we're not, why wouldn't they just deny if they're gonna deny it? But if there's, for some reason, no ability to get a consensus on the architecture and historic review board, it's just floating around, then it's denied.
It'd be treated as a denial anyway.
I kind of.
If there's a stalemate, it's a
That
denial.
makes
It could be a stalemate.
It also makes it cleaner to go to the zoning board. It was denied, now they go to the zoning board of appeals.
We'll look at that, Ron, later.
And what Ed was saying,
And then we'll,
I don't know if you caught that, Ed was saying, well, it automatically goes to zoning board of appeals. It doesn't require a formal
I think you
application.
need to get jurisdiction there on something
It's been,
with an appeal. There's a zoning board of appeal. My belief, you need to have an action to be able to get jurisdiction.
but you attend the meeting. So you would just say,
Jurisdiction right in the code, if you say, after,
What if they don't wanna go? What if they wanna go back to the drawing
well,
board?
then they can just drop their application.
Yeah.
You can do that.
All right, we
anytime.
can-
Or change their application. Yeah, I mean, there's a million other options.
Just to be clear, they can't change their application and then go to zoning. It has to be the identical one that was.
Oh, yes, yes.
Right.
But at that point, the zoning board could act as de novo and ask them to change it.
I suppose.
We'll
I
get
mean,
that.
I can see an issue where basically the HR.
Do they, wait a minute, do they do that, or say we deny it, and then it goes all the way back to the
do
planning
they
board?
do that, the zoning board?
No,
Usually they
no,
just
no.
approve or deny, right?
Right? They have-
Yeah, I never heard anything in between.
I don't think there was
It's a-
any.
They do de novo and they review it as if they were.
Right, but they usually
They do
don't
it all
change
over.
it. You should send it back.
Okay.
All right, we'll look at that.
so we'll get that, but I think conceptually we're agreed.
Yeah, okay, we'll revise, we'll get you some information on,
Good, let's go. I said we're gonna end at 8 o'clock tonight, not tomorrow.
Issue four was an easy issue. This was a typo in 314 of the code, where it said, throughout the code, the sky exposed flame was 45 degrees, and the definition, it was 40 degrees. So that was.
Should be 45, right?
It should be 45. The other changes there for the planning board to the ARB will be changed, because you've already determined that you want to stay in the ARB. Okay? Issue 5, this was not addressed by the ad hoc committee. This is substance here on the powers of the AHRB, which was much discussion the other night at the planning board. At the last work session, there was discussion about removing the terms massing. There was also a typo here where the wording didn't make sense, but that could be easily fixed. But the question is, what powers do you want to have on excessive similarity and dissimilarity, or to recommend to the Board of Trustees on the ARB power? Massing was proposed to be removed. Massing on excessive similarity and excessive dissimilarity, massing cubicle content, gross floor area, height of both the building, and height of roof were proposed to be removed. That was discussed here at the work session, but there was much discussion the other day about it, and I think Rob, Javi, and I spoke about it afterwards. There needs to be some revision to that. I don't think that's the consensus of this board,
Can it be just?
Well, let's first get it.
Or you can leave it.
Leave it the way it is, yeah.
Well,
You tell me, Rob, I didn't understand, why do
Well-
we need to change that?
Well, here's, I guess, so at the highest level, do we all agree that actually both the planning board and the HRB, one way or the other, are dealing with massive issues?
Yes.
Okay, so then the question becomes, how, and we can be very clear about that, then the question becomes, what is the advantage of, to me, the danger of making lists is that it suddenly becomes, as soon as you start to list all the things that are presumably you can look at, then somebody comes in with something else and they say, well, it's not on your list of things. And so I would like to think that that the higher language of sort of whatever it is that allows both boards to deal with sort of massing issues, it doesn't make it necessary for us to have to enumerate FAR and these cubicle, I don't even know what that is, by the way. There are a whole series of like things that have been enumerated that I don't think, as Kurt could sort of undermine the review process as much as support it. I think it should be enough to find some language that enables both boards to deal with massing issues. And-
If you say
and-
massing,
and-
it's
and-
definitions.
And then we can try to come up with some kind of definition of massing that gives both boards enough control to address everyone's concerns.
If I recall.
I just find that language it was like very super specific and,
Somehow mass,
Yes,
So-
it's becoming a big issue, yes.
and I think that's okay. And I
But
think
it's okay if we define it,
there's-
define it clearly, and then
and
after
it's-
that, you
and
can
it's
use it.
gonna be messy in some cases, and in some cases, we may have to, even though I know everybody seems to not like it so much. There are gonna be joint meetings sometimes around ones that are particularly tricky.
yeah.
But I think it's better for there to be a kind of a higher language, maybe we define,
Higher meaning more general?
yeah, like a higher level idea that gives both boards more leeway to respond to their professional,
I'm sorry, what I was gonna say, that I think this issue started because maybe it happened, or there was a perception it happened, that somebody would leave the planning board with a defined volume. So this, I can build out to the very perimeter of this volume, and that was where the conflict was, because then of course the architectural review board looks at the whole depth of massing and architectural dimensioning and perception and neighbors and so forth. And we moved into that than we did, and there was a sense that it could not further restrict it. So I like the idea of this kind of sequential approvals that corresponds with development of a project. We're defining, let's say, maximum envelope, but I think it's worth enumerating that they can further define and reduce the massing. So there is that perception, or there's not that perception that somehow they walked away with this corrected volume.
Gross massing and fine massing. or something.
Okay, can one of you guys, so the plan is to put something in there. The question is, what do you want? This is a real detail-oriented thing. I mean, is there language you would want in there, taken out of there, added, changed, the definition to add? I mean, we just need to know the specifics so we can do it.
Where are you in the?
It's on page 5, issue number 5.
Issue number 5.
We read issue number
What, I
5. This is
had
not a
a slightly different thought, which I thought, I was gonna beg you and Javier maybe to create what you think is more general, useful language. And then I think instead of it being in this recommendation, we should refer to the HRB and say, what do you think if we had,
You don't need to change it now.
that's what I'm saying.
Leave it like it is.
If the
Here's a
HRB should
suggestion.
agree, there should be some joint language
Okay.
between our
So
board
leave
and
it
the
like it is now,
HRB.
so get rid of the issue, leave it like it is, then look at it again.
Can you
But
make
I-
a statement of what it is now?
Sure, the excessive dissimilarity, want to read it?
Well, basically the purview, right, I mean,
This is in powers, the architecture. So the architecture review tab, one of them is excessive similarity or excessive dissimilarity. 1, the architectural and historic review board may disapprove any application for a building permit referred to in as provided blah 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 with 200 feet of the proposed site and to provoke harmful effects by excessive dissimilarity. I'm not quoting specifically here, but now I am, or inappropriateness in relation to any other structure existing or for which a permit has been issued or to any other structure included in the same permit application or for which an application for a permit is pending in respect to one or more of the following features: massing, cubicle content, gross floor area, height or bulk of building, or height of roof, or other significant features such as but not limited to material, provided that a finding of excessive dissimilarity or inappropriateness shall be based upon preponderance of the evidence as set forth in the minutes. That's what excessive dissimilarity says, and I think that
They define it carefully, don't they?
it's very detailed. I mean, like there's cubicle content, which really sort of FAR, which we don't have. But whatever, I mean, these are more architectural terms, so whatever you guys propose, we can put in as a recommend, or you don't have to deal with it now. You can go to the ARB, see if any of the language needs to be changed.
Well, maybe
you can
we won't-
recommend something later.
All right, why don't we do that? Maybe it won't be any better in the end, and we'll end up back, that's all right. But we'll try
I
it.
appreciate it, you guys,
Yeah.
that cubicle is not the way I think we'll look at projects, so it's not, if it's something that you guys do, then.
And we don't have FAR, right?
Right.
So there are a bunch
that
of
was
things in
general.
there. I mean, I don't mind enumerating the kinds of things in
do it
general,
now,
that
but
both, yeah, that kind of, but I just think there are a bunch of terms, what seem like terms of art there that aren't defined anywhere. So maybe we can come up with some better language and make sure the AHRB is okay with it as well.
So we'll do that. We'll do that. Yep. Okay, we'll get rid of it, and you'll deal with it another time. Issue number 6. It's on page, we're gonna leave it as it is. Get rid of the
Page
previous
6,
recommendation.
issue 6.
This was a typo in the site plan. The A through, it said A through C, it should be A through E. These are the 5 districts, that's why they're
Changes everything.
waterfront A, waterfront B, Chauncey Park downtown at EI. So it should be A through E, not A through C. This is a typo when the printer drafted it. Okay, issue 7. It's on the bottom of page 6. This was an issue not addressed by the ad hoc committee. It came up in the past 6 to 9 months in reviewing the Main Street application. The issue discussed was which board made the decision to waive any building design standards of a 4th floor. The staff and the planning board analyzed this in the work sessions and determined that a 4th story should be a decision of the board of trustees upon recommendations from the ARB and planning board. That's an issue for you to recommend.
We're all set with that?
Now, it's confusing. Our ARB thinks it has a decision to make the 4th floor. Site plan says it has a decision to make the 4th floor. You should clarify it one way or the other.
The difficulty is, I'm putting myself in the place of an applicant. What the hell am I building, a 3-story or a 4-story? We're playing cards here. We ought to be succinct in our code, and let then, if somebody wants to make a change, let the applicant come in and say to somebody, I want to add 12 more stories.
But why not, so let me just try this, why could this work the same way the sky exposure plan works? Where we look at it's 3 stories, the applicant, which is the base, right, decided everywhere in town, there's no 4 stories as of right.
Okay, this is, well, that'll be the.
Okay, that'll be the next thing. I think where we came as 3
I think
stories,
that's
there's no
right.
4 stories as of right, so there's 3 stories is kind of the data. And then they can come and they can say, we want a 4th story and here's why. Most recent applicant, right, and we can say we buy it or we don't. We make that, as we vote the sky exposure plan, that goes as a, whatever we call it, a recommend, whatever, what do we call it? A recommendation. Huh? A recommendation to the AHRB.
To the DOT.
No, the issue here, you're in a downtown zone.
It's a downtown.
Downtown zone is going to be, your recommendation is full advisory from the ARB and the planning board on all issues.
Right.
So that's why the
But
language
the
is
applicant
written.
comes in with knowledge of what he has.
So
and
the
if he wants to
applicant
change
comes
it, he's
in
asking.
3
But the
4
question-
stories, you say you like it.
Right.
The ARB
Fine.
says,
But he knows, but the document said 3 stories.
Can I throw something out here, is that,
But why
I
would
think
the
the key is
AHRB?
in
they can
table
weigh it.
B8.
They will.
I don't think it is in table B8, if you make the D zone 45 feet and the DT zone 35 feet, then, you don't have to argue about a 4th story in the DB zone, and you can option it or not in the DT zone.
You
Oh,
could.
sorry, the other way around.
Right. In the DT zone, then wouldn't be allowed to have a 4th story. That's actually probably a big change. I'm not sure what underlying, we'd have to go look at.
Well, I think most people are concerned with the height of the buildings, not really how many stories.
But you.
Right now it's 3
That's right.
stories and 40 feet in the DT,
40 feet, 50 feet in the D.
4 stories and 50 feet in the DT.
50 feet is a tall building.
I was saying if we could probably reduce that to 45 feet. If you think of, in the DB, they typically will have a storefront, which should have 12 or 13-foot high ceilings, I would guess. Then you start building up on that, you probably need the 45 feet.
Yes.
There's ways you can get, actually, a lot of the older buildings will be 13 feet, and on the second floor will be 11. And, it does look like, so you almost need that 45 feet. But in the DT zone, because you don't have to have commercial in there, you could stick with the 40 feet. But if they do have commercial, making 35 would affect,
It affects the retail.
yeah. So I,
Through the outlet front.
yeah, but I would, and it's something that I would deal with the 50 feet now. When we make this change, if it's adopted by the Board of Trustees to have a 3-story building as of right and a 4th story permitted, and still have 50 feet, there's a sort of, who needs 50 feet for that? Or what kind of building?
Right,
There's
so
cornices and stuff.
so for sure we have to recalibrate the height
Yes.
standards and the stories, and I totally agree that the height is the thing. The number of stories, the Oceana building is 3 stories, it's taller than the recent 4-story building is proposed. So can we just loop back for a second to the approval things? I just want to see why it's still a problem. If we were to look at it and we say, okay, we actually think the 4-story thing is okay here. Why couldn't we, in the spirit of what we said before, that the BOT, even if they have the final right of, refusal, want that after they have the intelligence of all the boards? Why wouldn't it be the same kind of thing that we would send it to a recommendation to the AHRB, we say, we think a 4-story is okay? The 4th, they say, we don't, and that goes to.
Both go.
They both go.
And they both go to the board.
That's fine.
And they need to come back for the architectural issues on the
A
floor.
moment ago,
You're not gonna have 2 finished projects.
I mean,
yeah, but a moment ago, we talked about a height and not matching the number of stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think you
Okay,
have to
if
have
somebody-
an issue with stories.
Now, if it's height only, and you say 3 or 4 stories in 45 feet, then both of them work, except it doesn't really work with retail on the first floor. It's kind of pushing it.
DT, it would probably not work for retail.
Okay, but that's fine. Then you're an applicant and you know that. You're not gonna go over 45 feet, period. You wanna put in 6 stories, you're gonna have short people. You know, that's really where it comes from.
Do you want to take out the stories and then take out the number of
No, I like
stories
both.
and just go?
Yeah, both is good.
I think it's
3 stories in each, remembering the DT can just be pure residential with no downstairs, so, but go from 50 to 45 in the DB, and then leave it 40, put 3 stories with the,
And no ability to go to 4.
Because otherwise, there's gonna be a conflict going on forever.
with the
With the ability to go to 4
would
in
have
the
the
DT.
ability.
Well, we've had these conversations about
That's what it currently is.
Now, the code though, the upper
Yeah.
story setbacks is confusing, 336E1.
Before we start the setbacks, so that, just because we were talking about stories, we're measuring the height.
No, this goes into that, yeah.
We have to get
From the
on
average
the curve.
sidewalk, are we
Yeah.
measuring stories also from that? Once you get on that side of.
That's a big problem.
Main Street,
We haven't
can have-
talked
they
about
have
that. We
some
haven't
versions.
fixed that. We looked at 33 Main, and we looked at it and said, yeah, we've got the height figured out. They meet the height.
You know,
But then you
on the
go
side
to
of
the
the
stories,
street.
on the other side, it's like
Oh,
7-story
we did
buildings.
it, further on in here.
It's a drive.
Anything that could walk out onto the sidewalk in the downtown would be considered a story, even if it was definitively described as a
That
basement.
has been changed, we're getting to that in a minute. But the upper story setbacks, language, it talks about being set back, but it also talks about who makes the decision. So the language, if you recall, I think it was in both in 66 and 68 and across the street, they were saying that, the language says this, that the code allows 4 stories in the appendices. But it doesn't, there's arguments to be made that the language doesn't say that in the text.
That's the
So it's,
difficulty.
that's what we're trying to fix.
Yes.
And the fix was 3 stories in both, with an option for 4 stories in both. This was the initial fix.
With a maximum height.
With a maximum height, the height would come down in the DB zone to 45. Then you need to decide who makes that decision. If you recommend it to the Board of Trustees, and the Board of Trustees says, yes, I agree 4 stories are good, or I say, no, 3 stories are no good, then the ARB comes back and says, either way, that when there's 3 stories, they want 4.
No, you
Or
said
the
earlier,
three,
they get,
That's the
it's
word,
already
yeah.
done.
Okay,
As a recommendation, the
Okay, so you-
AHRB would be recommending. in the
Board of
DB
Trustees gets it
zone,
last.
As we
okay,
do.
okay. If that's what you guys want, that's, I just so it's clear, that was the thought
It's
process.
consistent.
It's the only thing that's
Language.
consistent.
Okay, so the language that's proposed wouldn't change, other than decreasing the height in the DB zone. Is that what,
And the setback is always good, I mean, I don't know. if
the upper story setback was not an issue, that we didn't change.
Well, okay,
So it's read
I'll
something.
offer just a counter to this. The original idea of the mandate, the notion was that 4-story would always be so higher building. And that So if that was gonna, if you wanted to do a fourth story, then there needed to be like a significant massing change, right? So that's why. So the kind of the mandated setback traveled with the fourth story thing.
Yeah.
Now, if the 3-story thing is the baseline, and they want to add a fourth story, they have to do, it might be a set, they're gonna, presumably, they have a bunch of massing related things that they could do to try to make us in the HRB and everyone else feel comfortable with it. It might be a setback,
This is
might
what,
not.
this is what it says
It
now,
could-
it's mandatory now. And
Right,
then
but I
fourth
don't,
shall
I think it was
receive-
mandatory when a fourth floor was as of right. The idea was to moderate that by mandating the setback. Now that 3 stories is the baseline and the 4th story is, then I think that that's one of several tools, but they have a bunch of things they might want to do.
You want to change that language and say it's something to consider?
Right,
Is it
I
setback?
think so, I think it's like a setback, and it's one thing to be considered, but they might have a better way of doing it.
So
And
make it non-mandatory for the setback, but something to consider.
they could,
They're going.
Do we really have to mention
because
it?
they already need permission
Or
now
take
to
it
go
out.
above 3.
I wouldn't even mention it, that's what an architect gets paid for.
That's in the.
It's true, and actually, the downtown design guidelines
Design
have a
guidelines.
little diagram of the setback, so just take the language out entirely.
Or, then you still have to amend the design guidelines. So
What do you say
might
consider?
do Was say consider.
Let's see what the, hold on.
Then
let's
you
see
look
what
at the
the
design guidelines. They show us that, but there's some.
Is there a problem?
2 minutes, change, so
I don't have to do that while we're going on.
fine.
It is good, but I'm just saying, it doesn't, we'll have that option when the applicant comes before us and they're trying to pitch 4 stories. You can say,
Did you
set
look
it back,
at this?
you
Yeah.
better set it back, because it looks, in your renderings, it looks like it's too tall.
But that's part of negotiations. I don't think it should be in writing.
Overall, he's going to do is take it, not mandatory, but a guide, consideration to give.
And then the
Well,
HRB.
that's what an
The
architect gets
HRB,
paid for.
make them do it, nice, make them take off the whole 4th story. That's a real setback.
It's presumably,
That's an existential setback.
That's the ultimate
That's a
setback.
setback that is so deep.
Okay, where are we?
sorry,
Let me move, we can look at that.
can I?
Wait, one more. Nadia says something.
All right, so this brings up this issue about, which we're going back to the sequence issue. So now an applicant, let's say there's planning board approval, this set of plans approved, goes to HRB. That's not approved, this other set is approved. So now both sets are taken to the planning, to the.
Board of Trustees.
This is the planning board approved, and
Planning board recommendation and
Right.
the HRB recommendation.
That's what King Solomon went through.
Yeah, there
because then I think it really breaks the onus
Both
on them.
boards.
You can have 2 totally different designs.
Sure.
One of the things I was gonna say, though, we've had very good, well, you know, I think Rob mentioned the ones, I mean, but it basically has been, it's worked fairly well, even though there isn't a nice clean process. Like the HRB and the planning board has put together projects that have basically taken advantage of both skills without being